let's talk about studying. It's not everyone's favorite thing. I certainly never really liked it, but I also didn't know what I was doing when I was younger, and now I do, so I feel like I should probably share this information. So studying is typically looked at as not being fun. And why is that? It's typically time consuming, and a lot of times I don't feel like students feel like it was worth it. So like if you say like I studied and then you bombed this test and you failed it, and you'd be like, well, what gives? I studied. And it's very frustrating, and I totally understand that. Something that I believe as a teacher and just like a person is I don't want to waste people's time. What I finally got to was I didn't know how to study, and so my students probably don't know how to study. And so I wanted to address that today. The worst thing is whenever I have a student who did poorly when I thought they were prepared, and they say, well, Missengknow, I studied. And I'm like, okay, how did you study? And they either don't know how to explain it, or they say, I looked at the notes, or I read through the study guide. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but that wouldn't really necessarily be studying unless you've noticed a difference. What I really want to have happen when you are studying is that you are essentially learning this material. Like, I'm a teacher. I want you to learn. I don't want you to just pass my class and that's it. I want you guys to keep these skills and then take them with you to use forever. Like any time, for these communication skills, these writing skills, these speaking skills. They're really important. And so I would really want you guys to have them stick with you. And so then I don't feel like I wasted your time trying to teach you for a year or two. So I learned about this learning technique, and once I started using it, it never failed me. I've failed tests before, like, I know, right? Like I have, and it was typically in subjects that I wasn't good at, but I finally learned that I needed to learn how to study. But once I started this technique, I never failed a test. I never failed an assessment. So there's this learning technique by someone called Richard Feynman. He was a Nobel Prize American physicist, I think around the 60s. And the best thing about this is that it's only 4 steps. The very first step is to choose what it is you want to talk about. What is it that you're going to be looking at? What is it that you want to study? Let's go ahead and assume that it's going to be on nouns. So once you've decided, okay, I want to focus on nouns, boom, you're done with step 1. Step 2 is to pretend that you're teaching it to someone who's in 6th grade or lower, and you're going to try to explain it all in the simplest terms possible. If you can explain it all in simple terms, most likely you've learned it and you got it, and you can teach it to someone else. If you can do that, boom, you're done with step 2. Step 3 is where you start to identify those gaps. What do I not know? What am I struggling to explain in simple terms? For a lot of my students, it's going to be the difference between plural nouns and collective nouns. So plural just means more than one. But then you have a collective noun, which is one group of multiple or plural things. So like a pride of lions would be one group of many lions. Lions is your plural noun, but the word pride in that case is going to be that collective noun that means one thing of many. And that can be confusing for people. So if I know that I'm confused on collective nouns, I've identified my gap. The final step is to go through the source material. These could be notes, these could be assignments, these could be previous tests, it could be a video, it could be the internet, it could be the teacher, anything that you can go back to reference and check, okay, what is a collective noun? I look back at my notes, like, okay, I get it. I rewatched the Missengknow video. Okay, I get it. And then you can go back to step 2 and start to simplify the language again, and then you can start to explain it using simple concepts. And then if you can finally get to that, then most likely you've learned it. So once you've gone through collective nouns and you're like, ooh, maybe I still don't remember exactly what plural means, same thing, go back, revisit that source material. And then, can I explain this using simple language? I've had some people ask me about how to go back to source material, because although, like, yeah, you can read through your notes, you can read through your study guide. If you are not absorbing that information, then it's hard to know, like, did I review it? How do I know I reviewed it? And so here's my full proof. It always works. It's never let me down. It really does just cost you time and effort. Here's what you do. You can do this with Note cards, you can do this with pieces of paper that you cut up. Okay, literally start with one note card. I had to rely on this to get through one of my linguistic courses. I could go through 75 plus of these easily because I did this technique. You literally start with one. I wrote down some dates of when I wanted to know when we switched between Old English, Middle English to Modern English, and then I wrote the answers on the back. And then I just used this one note card going back and forth until I could not get it wrong. Do not make 50 note cards. You're going to give yourself a false sense of security thinking, well, look at all this stuff I did, but that doesn't mean you know it. Start with one. Do it until you cannot get it wrong. Only then do you make your second note card. It was a date I needed to know, and so I wrote down the answer. And then you go through both of them until you cannot get it wrong. And then you add a third until you can't get them wrong, and then a fourth. And you keep doing that. And it does take time, but then you know this information. And there's no way that you're going to get this wrong. And this comes in handy, especially when you have fill in the blank tests where it's either you know the answer or you don't. I really love how the mind works. I'm super interested in how information is logged into the brain with short-term memory. How do you transport all of that into your long-term memory? And I'm just fascinated by it. So please try this out if you have had trouble with taking tests in the past. It gives you more confidence. It gets easier the more you do it, and then it ends up ultimately saving you time in the long run. So please send me an email if you have any questions, and I hope this helps you, and don't be afraid to learn. Bye guys.